All right, good evening. I'm going to call this November 6th, 2025, Sammamish Planning Commission meeting to order. First thing I'm going to do is a roll call. We've shifted seats just a little tiny bit here, so we'll start out with Hisham Elkawad.
Here.
John Bachman.
Here.
Suda is not here yet. Mike Bresco has an excused absence. I am Mark Boffman, and I'm here. Ajay Chakraprani.
Here.
Syed Safavian.
Here.
Next is our meeting minutes from the last meeting. I'm sorry, agenda first. On the agenda this evening is a discussion about the fees on parks and transportation impact fees. Anybody have any comments on the agenda? Okay, now we'll do approval of the minutes from October 16th. Anybody have corrections or comments from the October 16th meeting minutes? Okay, we'll call those meeting minutes approved. Next, public comment. Would anyone like to make public comment this evening? Mr. Eastman.
Great to be here. It's great to be here. I've missed these meetings and all the input you guys have. I probably had about an hour conversation with myself today on this agenda. And I'll try to sum up my findings here in 3 minutes, but I'm like, okay, what are we doing tonight? We got these impact fees and like why? And I think the premise is the state wants to encourage smaller, more affordable units to be built, and they figure they can do that by creating this sliding scale, which is great. And city staff has an obligation to bring this forward to you guys. You have the obligation to weigh in and, you know, add questions, which are awesome. I saw them in the packet. I mean, the questions that were being asked, I mean, you guys do a great job. But it's all on this premise that this will bring smaller, more affordable housing because the state's telling us. And after an hour-long conversation myself, I said, what is it that Sammamish wants? What do the people want? Do we want smaller, more affordable units? Do we want, you know, big estates on, you know, big lots? As a landowner, I have no idea like what I should be putting on my property, to be honest with you, because for the last 8 to 9 years, all I hear about is what we don't want. And we don't really have this North Star of what it is that we do want. And so that puts staff in an awful position because they're having to protect the city and comply with state law, but they don't really know what the people want or what they don't want. With this whole town center expansion, you know, there was all the people that came out against it, and I think Karen House said, you know what, the people elected us to make these decisions, and this is the best decision that we have to make. And we saw the results of the election. Like, clearly that's not what the people wanted. So it's funny because when I talk to Paul Stickney a lot, every conversation I have always comes back to, you know, what are the wants and the needs? And, you know, I get sick of it. Sometimes I tell Paul, just like, okay, I get it. But I just had this whole hour-long conversation with myself, and I came to the answer that what is it that people want? If it's the premise that we want smaller housing, like on lots, like this is like way low-hanging fruit. Like your tree code right now, 50% of tree retention on a lot, like that's impossible to build small houses. Plan review, Kirkland, Seattle, you can go buy an ADU plan fully approved for the city online and use it over and over again. Here, it's a custom review for each time you build an ADU. Anytime you're gonna build something small, it should be efficient, it should be quick, but not here. Everything has its own custom review. The pre-plat, long plat subdivisions, review times are through the roof on those. Or if you do a short plat for big houses, review times are much quicker. But it all reverts to what is it that people actually want. And then we go after it. But we don't know that here yet. So I don't know if you guys can feed that up the food chain to city council, especially with this new election. And we can put behind us what it is we don't want and find out what we do want, so you can unleash me to come to you with, proposals for what you're looking for, and city staff can be like, okay, we're unleashed. We can go attack and spend our time on promoting things that the people in the city wants. I mean, it would just be a lot more holistic. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Anybody else? Mr. Stickney?
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Paul Stickney, Sammamish. I've got 3 things to chat about today. One that is on your agenda. It mentions what impact fees are collected, and stormwater system fee is missing. Now, it's not an impact fee, but it is a significant charge up front. I noticed in the packet it mentioned meeting with internal stakeholders. I'm curious how many meetings were held and who were the people at those meetings. Talks about an average house size of 2,153 square feet. Is that averaging single-family housing only, or single-family and multifamily in the city? It talks about using square footage. Agree mostly, except in centers. You might want to consider a mix of square footage and traffic counts, because building types tend to generate far lower AM and PM peak generation plus internalization. So I'm not sure size by itself is correct in a center. I've noticed in the packet it talked about being tied to 2,100 housing units. What are those sizes? Where's the list of how many are at what size of those 2,100? So what's a forecast for the revenue generation? And it talks about impact fee policy for other things. I have thought about that too. That's in the future. For your upcoming meeting, here's part 2 of your North Star on the town center. We are at a place, well, hell, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, I'll just say it. Putting traffic front and center for rigorous is important, but it's only one of 4 major legs. One of the other major legs we've never done. Housing first. What are the different types of housing we need in our community of A, B, and C housing over cycle of life and generation? And we need to do a rigorous study to set housing, because it drives everything else. Then comes services that are tied to what's on the ground today and what our future is. And then comes transportation to meet housing and services. I call that HST. So I suggest that this North Star put as much emphasis on housing, finance, and all other factors as transportation, and not make it mostly about transportation. Have that be important, but so are the other things. The things that I turned into you guys today and have put online recently are quite simple. The catchphrase that was going on about no to 4,000 in town center. Easy to make a meme and a discussion on, but it's inauthentic unless you know what your citywide housing needs are, what I've called citywide housing being out of balance. What are the consequences of meeting those needs or not that are radically different? What's the informed opinion of the public based on those needs and consequences? And then you decide on town center after you know what your numbers are citywide. So I will just close and say, it's not about no to 4K in town center. It is about, let's see, where's my last page here? Here it is. It is to yes to chi before TC. Appreciate the chance to speak. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Anybody else in the room here? Lena, anybody online?
Yes, we have one hand raised online. Mary, I'm promoting you now. Please feel free to speak when you're ready.
Good evening, Planning Commission and people in the room and people on the line either tonight or later. I've lived in Sammamish for 25 years, and in about 2015, so like 10 years ago, I started attending not only city council meetings, but also the water district meeting. And I just wanted to ask, maybe when the FCF's group people introduce themselves, if they're available, or if someone from staff knows. The FCF SCS group, that's hard to say, for the water district has been doing a lot of things for the number of years, and I'm wondering if it's the same people. John Ducci's name seems familiar, and I just know that the water district people uses FCS to great levels of impact. They've been doing very well. So I was just interested in that. The second thing is when you talk about housing types, in the water district meetings and in the city, we just haven't been getting the revenue that we need, because just raising the 1% property tax is not enough to cover the costs of services that people want and I believe they need. So you need to look like, for the water district, I know they just added a project. So it costs about $8 million, I think. And it's just so that they can hold enough water. So when single family homes are watering in the summer, that there will be enough water so that they can do that. Whereas if you have multifamily homes, those don't tend to use as much water because they usually don't have as big a yards. There's multiple families in a house, and they're doing less of the watering. So the things that you use really depend on your housing type. So how big your roads are, how long your roads are. Like if you look at Sky Apartments up just at the beginning of Southeast 4th Street, they're really stacked there, and the houses, they're all units that go up, and there's a lot more taxes that come from the footprint there than from they're larger, big single-family homes. And I know people are saying they don't want town center and they don't want stacked units or smaller units, but the problem is that large single-family homes are suburbia, and suburbia does not pay for itself. It puts the city and kind of the whole budget into it's just not feasible to do. There's too much cost for the services, for the roads, for the repaving, for the other things. You do need to come up with different things. So almost worldwide, if not nationwide, if not worldwide, we need smaller, different, diverse housing units, which is why our city, our state, and pretty much the whole nation are working on things for that. So I was really happy to read a lot of the thoughts and the matrices that are in the packet tonight. I think a lot of good discussion has been done. I like the fact that there are ranges, and I just think that the Planning Commission has done a really excellent job with, I believe, every single one of you participating, asking questions, and for staff getting back on those. So keep it up, and please think about, you need different housing types.
Thanks, Mary. Anybody else?
No more hands.
Okay, I also want to mention, Lena just handed me a note that Suda has joined us online, so Suda's here. Welcome.
Thank
Okay.
you, Chair. Sorry about that. I was a little bit late having computer reboot issues.
Understood. All right. Let's get into the main topic for this evening, which is this discussion about impact fees. And David, I'll let you introduce our guests or do whatever you're going to do.
Thank you, Chair. David Pyle, Community Development Director. I'll go ahead and pass it off to FCS for their introduction. They have been helping us sift through the update to the city's impact fees, which is no easy feat, and we really appreciate their support.
Thank you very much. Thanks, David. Thank you, Commission. So I'm John Ghilarducci. I'm a principal with FCS. I'm joined by Doug Gabbard, who was the project manager on the work, and he'll share some of the responsibility for the presentation. We also have Luke Nelson back here, who did the real heavy lifting, that being the calculations. And yes, we are the FCS that works with Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District. One of our partners, Chris Gonzalez, leads that work. So I couldn't tell you what we've been doing there, but that's us. They still seeing the...
Is our share screen still showing? It's showing us sharing here. There we go.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
So the way that we've set this up, we'll talk a little bit, and I'll focus on some of the key characteristics of impact fees. We'll touch on the legal framework, and then Doug will walk through the transportation impact fee calculation and the parks impact fee calculation. Then we'll come back and talk about implementation considerations, including scaling. Some things to remember, key characteristics of impact fees, and I'm sure you're well familiar, but some listeners may not be. We're talking about the one-time fees paid at the time of development by new development, or in some cases redevelopment. These are not ongoing rates. If you're already on a developed property, you don't owe anybody an impact fee unless you are redeveloping and increasing the demands of your property on infrastructure. The law allows impact fees or authorizes them for transportation, parks, schools, and fire. That's it. Stormwater was mentioned earlier. That's a different statute, but the city does have stormwater connection charges or general facilities charges as well. Impact fees are for capital only. So we calculate them based on the cost of capital construction, and you can only spend the money on capital projects and capital construction. They include both an existing buy-in element, buying into existing infrastructure, and then a future or planned looking element that basically is based on the cost of planned projects in many cases. So those two elements together are intended to represent the fair share of infrastructure that will serve that new customer, that new developing customer. And impact fees are for a share of system facilities, not local facilities. So not ingress and egress from your property, but a share of the transportation system. That's an example. We follow the law very carefully, embodied in RCW 8202, which has a very prescriptive law section of statute there. We've got definitions and a lot of rules. You have to use them within 10 years, or you can be required to pay them back, but we have a framework for calculating the fees all contained in the statute. There have been some recent additions to the RCW, and the key language here is in red. And this is the language that requires impact fee schedules now to reflect the proportionate impact of new housing units, including multifamily and condo units, based on square footage, number of bedrooms, or trips generated, such that you have a proportional lower impact fee for smaller housing units and higher impact fee for larger housing units. This has come to pass because there's sort of been a collective realization in not just Washington, but all over the region, that when we were applying impact fees uniformly to new residential dwelling units, we were in effect disincentivizing lower cost housing, because then those uniformly applied impact fees are a larger percentage of the cost of construction. And so this scaling has been a trend in the industry, and now it's a requirement for impact fees. Regarding accessory dwelling units, there's also in 2023 language added that basically requires that new ADUs be charged no more than half of what the charge would be for the principal dwelling unit on that site. So it limits the charges that you can impose on new ADUs. That's more of a code issue than a math issue, but and then there's also new language, and this is new. This year, 50% reduction for qualifying multi-housing that is within a station area. So this can be rail or bus station, and if you've got qualifying multifamily within close proximity to those stations, they get a 50% reduction. Okay, Doug.
Let's talk about math. And there was tremendous enthusiasm. So we begin with transportation. Impact fees are a fraction in the way that we do them. The numerator of which is the eligible cost of capacity increasing projects. In other words, the total cost of serving the system that will be applicable or allocable to growth. The way you figure that out is you look at the individual projects in a project list and you assign to each one a percentage that represents how defensibly, what portion of that project can be defensibly allocated to growth. And I will show you what that list looks like. The denominator of this calculation is growth in new person trip ends. Now, the city does its planning in vehicle trip ends, and so it was just a small conversion to get that into person trip ends. We like to use person trips because that creates a better nexus if you have projects that, for example, are bike ped related. It looks funny to have bike ped projects and an impact fee that is measured in vehicle trips. So we do it in person trips. That's kind of universal, and so we make that calculation. So this is the denominator. This is the calculation of the denominator. The final result of which is in the second to last column, the 2,477 PM peak hour person trip ends that will be added between 2025 and 2044. Now, you won't recognize any of these numbers, as I said, because the city uses vehicle trips, but this is directly derived from that 2,100 dwelling units that are expected to arrive between 2025 and 2044. In the last column here, there is a growth percentage of 6.33%. You will see that percentage again in just a minute. That percentage represents the portion of your customer base that will arrive between now and the end of the growth forecast. So the percentage of your total future customer base that will be new from today. This is your project list. So this was derived from a couple of different sources, as you see in the note on the right. Also, staff jumped in to give us some help and refinements, which is absolutely completely appropriate. You'll notice that we don't have total costs for all of the projects, which is fine. It's just we can't include them in the impact fee if there's no cost provided. So in the first numeric column, the total cost, that is the total cost of the project provided to us. The eligibility percentage in the next column is the portion of each project that can be defensively allocated to growth. And you'll notice that there is a variety of percentages, but some of the most common ones are, number one, 100%. You'll see a number of projects listed that have 100% eligibility. That means that the project really is completely allocable to growth, and therefore 100% of that cost can be included in the impact fee. You will also see several projects with that 6.33% that you just saw on the previous slide. What that means is we interpret that project to be providing capacity that will be used both by existing customers and also future users. And so we allocate that proportionately. And so the total of the future customer base that will be new is 6.33. And so that's why it gets that percentage. And then there are some projects that we just can't allocate to growth at all. These are things that are safety, things that are maintenance, things that are straight replacement projects where you're replacing like for like. These are things that don't add capacity. Sometimes there is confusion if a city will say to us, well, if we're replacing an asset with something that's going to last a lot longer, isn't that adding capacity? And the answer is no, it's not. Useful life is not the same thing as capacity. Impact fees are designed to give you that first cycle of construction, and by the time that asset needs to be replaced, your tax base should be kicking in to help you handle that. So impact fees are not are not really ever meant to go beyond an initial life cycle. So when you take all these,
Doug,
yes,
is it okay if we interrupt and ask questions as we go?
absolutely,
So I have a question about this,
please.
which may be too technical, too far into the weeds for this discussion, but
That's what we have Luke for.
I'm not going to ask about math, well, a little bit. So is this a standard practice across what everybody does? And here's why I'm asking that question. You said, 6.3% growth, and then we have a project that everybody's going to use, so 6.3% of the cost of that project is allocated to the growth portion of it, essentially. I may be mincing the words a little bit, but if we have growth that requires us to add a turn lane, and the only reason we need that turn lane is because of the growth, and but for that growth, we would not need that turn lane, why do we only allocate the percentage, in this case 6.3, to the growth, when in fact the growth was 100% responsible?
That's an excellent question. It's one that frequently comes up in other infrastructure types. The short answer is that, I don't know how short it's going to be, but if you are, sometimes you have to do something to a street, and you wouldn't have to do it if it weren't for growth. But the truth is that your existing customers are going to derive a lot of the benefit from that project. And so it's not merely a question of what is causing you to do that project. It's more a question of who's benefiting from that project. Does that make sense? So this comes up a lot in, it's easier to explain when we're talking about water systems and pipes. And a city will have to put in a larger diameter pipe in the ground to accommodate growth. They wouldn't have to put that larger pipe in the ground if it were not for growth. So why can't we just allocate the entire cost of that replacement pipe to growth? Because we wouldn't need it otherwise. Well, the answer to that is, what you need for growth is the incremental upsizing of that pipe to the new, bigger size. But even if you never had any growth in the system at all, you would eventually need to replace that smaller pipe, even at a smaller size. And if you remove that cost from the existing ratepayers, they've kind of gotten a windfall. Does that logic make sense?
Yes. I'm not sure I agree with it,
Don't
but
like it,
yes.
but yeah.
I understand there has to be a baseline of how we do these things, but I'm sure there would be people that look at this, and if they're thinking about the math, they would say, well, if we just didn't have any growth, then we wouldn't have to spend most of this money, so why am I paying for it?
Yeah.
Growth is the trigger, yeah. The only thing I'll add is, in the situation you were describing, that may well be a higher percentage to growth anyway. That might, adding a lane might not be stuck with the proportional allocation. All the numbers up there that are not that proportional allocation, or there's some different percentage, we had the assistance of the city's traffic engineers, DKS, to help us make those allocations. So we tried to be as scientific as possible.
And we are by nature conservative in these things, because not only is there state statute that governs what you can and cannot do, but there's also federal case law that is watching over us all. Perhaps you've heard about some of the new cases. The latest one is the Sheets case from California. So that is kind of the fourth of the major Supreme Court land use exaction cases that really govern what we can and cannot do, and what the feds will consider, what is a legitimate exaction versus an illegal taking. And so we have to be a little conservative.
Go ahead.
You go first, then.
A couple of questions before going further. I want to make sure that I understand what you're talking about. You said that the numbers shows that between 2025 and 2024, number of trips basically is going to go from 36 to 39,000. The population increase that I've seen the numbers is 17,000 additional people. So we're saying 17,000 additional inhabitants in a city would generate only 4,000 trips?
So
where are those numbers coming from?
The assumption that we are using is the 2,100 dwelling units between 2025 and 2044. That's the assumption underlying this.
Wait a minute, we need David on this. Relate the 2,100 dwelling units versus the population increase of 17,000 between now and 2044.
If I could ask you to go backwards for a second, I apologize. I had to make sure the computer didn't die.
So I asked the question why we showing that the current number of trips in 2025 is 36,000 and it's going to increase to 39,000 by 2044. The difference between the two is only 4,000 trips. Right? 3,000 actually, 36, 39. So, but then I've seen the numbers as far as the growth in the population going from current to 2044 to show an increase of 17,000 more people.
Yeah,
It looks like the analysis is based on 2,100 dwelling units. So I'm trying to build to have the relationship between 2,100 dwelling units. Would that be because of a 17,000 people, additional people that they would be adding to the population between now and 2044?
Yeah, I think you're asking the wrong person. So we base it on 2,100 units. I don't know how we get to this point with the math. I'd have to defer to our consultant team to understand how we get from 2,100 units in growth to PM peak hour person trip ends and what is shown here on this table. I don't know the math intimately, and I've been peripherally involved in this project.
Let's continue. Can you elaborate how you determine eligibility? What are the criteria that you use for eligibility for each project?
Eligibility is determined by an estimate of the extent to which the project will create capacity for new users.
But then you just a minute ago, 2 minutes ago, you said that which is true, some of the projects you're not really building it because of the capacity increase. For instance, safety improvement that you're making is not a capacity increase.
And that's why safety improvements have zero eligibility.
So all these traffic impact fees that we are collecting from developers, from builders, would go to the capacity increase?
Yes, that's what it's for.
So we add in the sidewalk, that is not necessarily a capacity increase, that is a safety improvement. So any sidewalk improvement, the reason I'm saying that City Council has been very clear that all the projects that we do in Transportation Master Plan based on multimodal system. So we throw in all those out and saying all the capacity lane addition for vehicular traffic?
No.
Inconsistent. The multimodalism versus capacity increase.
Well, you can increase multimodal capacity. You can increase, not only can you increase vehicular capacity, you can also increase capacity for pedestrians. You can increase capacity for bicycles, and that can be counted.
Right, but let's look at the non-motorized transportation. It's not only building the sidewalk, but also, let's say, put in a pedestrian crossing, which is a safety issue. So you separate the sidewalk from the...
No. A safety-only project, like in here, that would be an ADA barrier remediation program, the third project there. That is something that would be 0% eligible. You can create capacity in a way that is safety conscious, and that could still count. What the critical factor is, are you creating additional capacity? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I was hoping that you would say that some safety project could be eligible for.
Yeah, I can't say that.
To the extent that there's a safety element to any of these projects or sidewalks, or then they're included in the project and they would get benefit from the same allocation as the rest of the project. We're not carving a project up and saying no to the safety element. It's all one project. If it's and that's another reason why the impact fee will be based on person trips, because we're trying to connect the basis of the charge with the multimodal transportation project list, so that if it were all based on vehicle trips, we'd have a harder time allocating sidewalk improvements or bike lanes to the impact fee if we're basing it all on vehicle trips, but we're not. We're basing it on
I was
person
hoping,
trips.
I was hoping that you would use the word that you use, system, rather than localized. I thought that you're going to go that way and say, okay, if it is a system base, they're eligible. If it is a local, it's not eligible. So that's
Well, that's true to
I
a
guess
point.
it's a matter of how you
It's
interpret it.
A system improvement is clearly includable. That's what these are designed for, if it's adding capacity for future users. If it's not, if it's correcting an existing deficiency, if it's a straight replacement like Doug was describing, we can't include it. And these do get litigated. That's why we
Thank you.
take a careful approach to it.
Go ahead, Ajay.
Thanks, Chair. So I have a question. Can we go back to slide 5? And then we'll come back to slide 11. Yeah, here you have said or trips generated. That's where it started. That's where my question started. The trips generated, you are then extrapolating it to the population increase and to the to how many trips would come out of that population increase, which is what looking at all traffic data and everything to get to where we are. Am I right about that basic assumption? How do you say, can you define trips generated for me?
Oh.
Because, yeah.
So I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing, because in this context, trips generated, it's possible to be talking about trip generation in two ways. One is talking about it in terms of growth assumptions, which is not what this is.
Okay.
The other way is to talk about it in terms of putting together your fee schedule. So what are the number of trips that are going to be generated by this new development? That is the context where that is used.
Okay.
So this is not about
not the
growth
first
assumptions.
one.
That's right.
Great, because when I first read it, I assumed it was the first one. It was just the trip generation, and I took it in the very literal sense of it. And I'm like, how do you conclude that in such a short time? Then I went to your slide 11. If you can go to slide 11.
You bet. Oh, very slow.
Yeah. So here, help me understand this thing. In this case, what we are saying, let's just take one example of it. We are saying the Southeast Connector Road and new signal at Southeast 8th is 100% eligible for the impact fees, whereas the one that you mentioned, which is the ADA barrier, is 0% eligible for this thing. And I immediately started thinking, are you trying to, not literally, but implying a difference to say that this is a discretionary versus a non-discretionary project? The ADA barrier is a non-discretionary project, so that doesn't qualify, whereas the Southeast 8th is a discretionary project.
I don't think that discretion is the right rubric for this. I think it's about, is the project creating capacity that will be used by growth? So if a project is in a new area and for practical purposes, the only cars driving over that are going to be in a new development that isn't here yet, for example, then that's a case where that's 100% growth, because existing customers aren't really going to benefit from that. It's really for growth, and then therefore growth can be expected to pay for it 100%.
Yep, totally agree with you on that point. But doesn't that risk us in saying that we are miscalculating this? That's probably too harsh a word, but we are kind of getting off base on this thing, because once you build something, people are going to utilize it. So your usage is going to go up. 8 o'clock in the morning, there is a lot of traffic. There is a road, there is a construction that's going on. There's a way that it can go on. And we did not intend that is going to be used or that's going to be in the impact calculations, but now it's getting done because people are using it a lot. Aren't we risking miscalculating it? Again, that's a harsh word, but I don't know of a different word to do. But aren't we risking miscalculating it because we are just extrapolating what we know today to what we think is going to be used tomorrow? Or how are we preventing that?
Well, that's a totally fair point. And so if I understand your argument, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you might well be asking, how can anything really be 100%?
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
Okay.
So you said it better than me.
Okay.
Yes. How can anything be 100%? I did not understand. I get the 6.3%. At some point, I could argue with you it's not 6.33, it's 14.44 or something like that. But how are we so confidently saying this is 100% and this is, and I can still understand the 0% as well. I get that.
Sure.
But I just can't get the 100%.
So
Please.
jump in if you disagree with this. But so taking an example, and I forget which one we were looking at, the Southeast 8th, was that the one?
Yeah, that was the one.
TR 127.
TR 127, that's correct.
Okay, that's 100% to growth. So we know full well, as you described, once that's built, it's not going to be 100% growth that's using that road. Existing residents of Sammamish will be using that road just like everybody else. But 100% of that improvement will be adding capacity throughout the system to growth, right? Those existing residents who now use that segment have created capacity on the segment that they're not using in order to use that segment. So 100% of that project is adding capacity to the system in Sammamish, even though we know that the folks who use that road are going to be a mix of, in actuality, a mix of new customers and existing customers or residents.
Got it.
Okay.
Now I don't know if I fully agree with that, but at least I understand where your metric is on that point.
And the other good news is that the bar isn't perfection on this. The bar is we are rational and consistent in how we apply the methodology, and we're not looking at one project and deciding one thing and then looking at a very similar project and deciding something else. We are being consistent, and it's a proven methodology. So I hope that's reassuring as well.
Yeah. Yep.
And on the ADA barrier remediation, I just want to talk about that one just briefly too, where that's a legal requirement. So instantly, it could be argued the system is deficient because there are parts of this system that aren't meeting that legal requirement. And so the cost to meet that legal requirement has nothing to do with future users. The only time we can include a portion of a project like that is when we could say, oh, these safety improvements are being built not only sized for the existing population, but the existing population plus growth, and then we may be able to do a proportional allocation of those projects. But if it's a legal requirement, chances are it's going to be a very small percentage that's allocable to growth because it's all about meeting the law, and that's correcting a deficiency.
And by that statement, you mean that when we might revisit this number at some point in time if some of the King County or state of Washington regulations or something changes and suddenly something becomes a requirement, and then we have to come back here and say, oh, we thought this was not 100, this is going to be 6.33%, but now it has to be 0% because it's one of the requirements, just like the ADA.
I think that's a possibility, yeah. And the law is silent on how often you have to reanalyze these fees, but those are the kinds of triggers that would bring you back to reanalyze it.
Got it. This is great because now I understand the triggers.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jay.
All right. So please.
Let's stay on slide number 11. Look at TR 115, the Hollywood Corridor Study.
TR 115. Is that the
total-
one with the 05 next to it?
Yes.
I'm with
the
you.
total project is only 1 million?
1.2 million. Yeah, I'm with you.
How did it come with that?
So they did not provide the cost numbers. Those were provided by the city by way of the city's TCIP by Public Works. I didn't have any input in that number either. That number comes from the city's TCIP.
Totally shocking.
And you'll
Because the
notice,
latest number that was presented to the city council was anywhere from 88 million to 120 million. Now we're showing 1 million.
yeah, that's different. That's not 88 million.
That must be a
I
small
believe
section.
the 05 has something to do with it. I don't know if that is a phase of it or if that is a design
I thought
component
that
to
was
it.
phase of it, but then you look at the other projects, they're not really phased. So why that particular project?
Well, there's another project also that is 228th. Where was that on there? To city limits. There was another one in there I thought that I saw.
Yeah, East Lake Sammamish, isn't it?
But again, part of this project is not producing cost estimates. That
Right.
has nothing to do with this project. Those cost estimates are imported from the city's TCIP, which is where those numbers are found. And simply, this project is about identifying the eligibility component, working with the city's traffic engineering and engineering consultant,
Right.
identifying what is transportation impact fee eligible and what makes up the base for our impact fee that then is calculated out based on new trip ends, which is based on the number of people that are going to be arriving with each of the units that's being built, based
Right.
on the scaled size.
And again, back to the question of eligibility, are these the numbers, the percentages coming from you or coming from our own traffic engineers?
So
Percentages.
this is one where we had some help from the city on this.
Okay, so
Which-
let's look at TR 125, Southeast 4th Extension Crusader Way. That is clearly, there's a capacity increase, and we're showing only 6.3%. Wait a minute, am I reading it right? 0, yeah,
TR 125?
yeah.
That looks to me, if my vision is aligned, that's a $941,000 project at 100% eligibility?
No, that's
No.
6.9
Oh, I'm
million.
sorry, I'm looking at 126. My apologies.
$26 million.
My
No,
apologies.
6.9, 6.3%. This is clearly capacity increase, right? And how could be a capacity increase at only eligibility of 6.3%? I can go on to look at TR, the second one, TRJ. ITS clearly is a capacity increase because you're doing the ITS actually to increase the capacity and traffic flow, and it's showing 6.3%.
So respectfully, we could be here all night talking about this list.
I'm just bringing a question.
I think the bigger question is the level that we should be at as a commission and with this discussion is whether you understand the premise of total cost, eligibility percentage, and how that's calculated.
I understand.
Now, I will definitely take back the commentary to my public works counterparts around some of these projects and, well, why is 0 versus 6.3 versus 19 versus 100, the variation. I also look at the Crusader Way project, understanding that that might necessarily be attributable to future town center development. And if that future town center development is causing the need for that Southeast Crusader Way, if that's, sorry, I was looking at it again, trying to look at it again. If that is actually attributable to that, well, then why is it not being included possibly at 100%? Because it would not be happening to add that capacity, but for new development occurring in the northeast and southeast quadrants of the town center, unless we don't know something about Eastside Catholic that maybe they're planning, which, that could be the other reason for it, but I don't know anything about Eastside Catholic planning a major expansion. I only know about the town center possibly growing in the northeast and southeast quadrants. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
We ready to move on?
Absolutely.
So take a look at that lower right-hand number. 32.2 million is the total of the eligible cost, at least in this iteration of the list. So that number now gets taken down to the top of the next table where we have total eligible costs, from which we will deduct your current impact fee balance because that's money you've already collected, don't need to collect it again. And so you have net eligible costs of just a little over 29 million. We then divide that 29 million by the 2,477 PM peak hour person trips to end up with an impact fee of $11,779 per PM peak hour person trip. I'm going to see how many times I can say that phrase tonight. So that is the impact fee, the calculated impact fee, the $11,000. Now, for ease of comparison, because who knows what a PMP person trip is, if we apply that to a single-family residence according to the ITE land uses, that would be an impact fee for a single-family residence of a little over $17,000. Take that with a grain of salt at this moment, because we haven't even talked about scaling yet. But that's in the traditional typology of fees, where you charge all single families the same, the way it used to be. That would be 17,000 would be the number that applies to the impact fee that we have calculated here. And so in theory, it's a nice little inflationary bump from the 14,000 per single family residence that you currently charge. But of course, it gets more complicated because you're going to be charging individual land uses. And here, you're looking at just a sample of what is in the ITE manual as far as land uses. You have all kinds of choices about how you want to deal with the vast list that is ITE land uses. The first two of these, we have made the note that they are subject to scaling, so don't take them too seriously, because we're gonna expand those later. But for other land uses, you can see what the impact fee is per unit of measure, and the unit of measure for a lot of these non-residential ones is typically 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. And so that's how that will get measured, and the fee will apply. Now, we were talking about the statute, the new statute earlier, about how for residential developments, impact fees can be scaled by number of bedrooms, number of square feet, or trip generation. This is where that comes into play, where we do scaling for the fee schedule and not so much for the growth assumptions. POCs, in my best Boston accent. So we're showing you a schematic of how our approach to parks impact fees, and I'm gonna go through this and then put numbers to them, and it'll probably make far more sense when we put numbers to them. But I want to begin with the assurance that this is what you already do, and so we have updated the current approach that the city uses, and so this may look a little cryptic, and I'm happy to unpack it, but it's not new. So I just want to make sure that we explain that. So we begin by valuing your current land and improvements in the park system, dividing that by the population of the city, and coming up with a park's capital value per person. We then multiply that per capita number by the growth in city population, again derived from that 2,100 dwelling units, to come up with a total dollar amount needed for growth. That's the right side of the middle box. We then do a check, and that check is, okay, we have a total dollar amount at the end of that second box. I wonder how that compares with the project list. And this happens sometimes, it hasn't happened here, but it does happen sometimes, that if the project list is for a lesser dollar amount than the value needed for growth, well, we're not just gonna collect more money than you need. And so we have to check the project list. However, if, as in your case, the project list is much larger than the value needed for growth, then we're good to go. The park value needed for growth can proceed. So that's what that CIP adjustment is all about on the left side. And so we then, if there's, in your case, the capacity adjustment is 1, so it's nothing. And so that park's capital value per person then becomes the impact fee per person, which then gets multiplied by an estimate of number of occupants of a dwelling unit, which could be related to size without spoiling what you're going to see in a little bit. So here we put numbers to all of that. So the total valuation, just shy of $400 million. divided by current population gets us down to about $5,797. We then figure out the assumed population growth, again, based upon that number of dwelling units, to a total value of $6.8 million. Then we do the check of the CIP. You got a $31 million CIP. I think we're good to go. So we don't need to deduct anything from that value needed for growth. But then we do a series of adjustments in the bottom panel of that bottom right-hand table. Those are the same adjustments that you have done before, figured out the same way. The purpose of these adjustments is to comply with the statutory requirement that you can't just lean on impact fees completely. You have to take into account other potential revenue sources, and the city has done that rigorously, and so we have maintained the city's practice of doing that. And so that 6.8 million gets knocked down to almost 2.9 million, which then gets divided by growth, and you have a growth cost per person of $2,449. Now we're moving back to the bottom left. That $2,449 is then multiplied by the average persons per dwelling unit to get a cost per dwelling unit of $6,734. Again, take that with a grain of salt because we haven't done scaling yet, but that is kind of what the traditional cost for a single family residence would be, $6,734.
So again, I'm not tracking exactly. Assumed population growth, what's that number? I mean, you said everything is based on 2,100 dwelling units. And
Yeah, so there's going to be like half a person in each dwelling unit?
Yeah.
I had the same question.
Yeah. That's.
I have a little bit different question.
Okay, well, let me answer this question first. Let's see. Okay. It's not a half person per dwelling unit. It's a smaller time scale. So the time period is not 20 years, it's 5 years for parks. So that it's only a fraction of that 2,100 dwelling units that will be realized in that time period. Does that make sense? So that's the answer, time period. Okay.
They do capital planning different for parks than they do for transportation. 5 years.
Transportation is 20 years, parks is 5 years.
Correct.
Thank you.
And by the way, you can do, that's not a legal issue. You can do that however you want to do it, however it's convenient for the city. So that's, as long as things are consistent within the impact fee, that's fine. Sir?
When we do the evaluation of the overall value of the parks, do we take into consideration the land was donated by someone to the city to convert to a park? Does that count towards the future residents that will be moving? Does that not help reduce the burden from the impact fee?
I think it's all included.
Luke?
So the list of inventory that we were given gave the value that the city paid for that. So there's nothing donated that's being incorporated in that.
Yeah. So it is.
According to the public records that I hear, and I could be completely wrong, that what is it called? The new one on 20th? Big Rock South, that land was donated. So it's free. So why are we not counting that towards reducing the overall value?
I think what I heard was that it's the sale price. It's those assets that were acquired. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So if it was acquired,
The city had bought
if
it.
we bought it, then it would count. But if it was donated, then the value is not reflected.
It's not in.
And that's why I'm saying, if I give you today 100 acres, does that not help you towards the next 10 years of land that you need to acquire to build parks for the future residents? How do you take that into the math when you do your total value?
So the method that we're using right now it often goes by the name of historical investment. And what we're trying to capture is the current value of the city's investment in parks. And if a piece of land was donated, then there was no investment. And so we bring the value up to date like we do, but if a cost wasn't incurred in the first place, then that is not the city's investment. And therefore, by extension, there's nothing that we can really ask the developers to pay for.
It does, in that sense, bring down the cost because it is not included in the total price that then is being divided out by population and the park's value per capita.
In my mind, if I give you today 100 acres, there will be no parks impact fee for the next how many years? That's how I was thinking about it, because I helped you from not going and buying more land to create new parks. I already took that burden off of your shoulders. And that's why I'm saying she just gave you 60 acres or 80 acres. How are you taking that into consideration? How are you making use of that and relieving the public or the future developments from that burden, since someone took care of that part for you?
It's not in the $399 million. That's how. Does that make? Yeah.
It doesn't, but I'm going to stop.
Okay.
Well, it results in a lower parks value per capita. Because if you actually valued, I guess the interesting way to look at it is if you did a valuation of the total current assets that are held versus the valuation of the acquisition costs, because the acquisition costs could come from many years ago as well, right? Isn't that part of? Mm-hmm. I don't know how the whole thing is calculated, so I'm trying to understand as well at the same time. But from my perspective, it does bring down the park's value per capita, which ultimately results in a lower impact fee. The question about whether it's contrasted against the actual full value of the land versus the acquisition value of the land, I think is a good one.
I'm looking at it from a very simple way. If I'm adding, let's say, 5,000 new units to Sammamish, that equates to adding 10 more acres of parks, according to these formulas and this math. I gave you 10 acres of land, so this way you do not need to go and charge impact fee to building those 5,000 units. And that's why I was asking, she gave you 60 acres. How did you take that into consideration? All what I'm saying that we took the value of the existing land and we said, if we add 1,000 more units, we need to add more parks. But someone already gave you the land that you need for the so many parks. Why are you not taking that into consideration? And it's 60 acres, it's not 1 acre.
So that donation would be taken into consideration at the time that it is given, and credit would be given for that as required by statute.
So if the same developer was giving us the acreage, then that would be it would neutralize their obligation to pay impact fees, and they might even get a credit. However, if it's a separate donor, like in this case, that was a philanthropist that decided to give the land to the city for the purpose of, recreation, et cetera. I don't know how it seems like what it does is it's not reported out in the total capital value. Right. Therefore, when it's divided across the population, the park's value per capita comes down.
Okay. If there were no parks in the city right now, and the first parks were the 60-acre donation, there would be no impact fee because we would not take the value of that donation and create an impact fee out of it. I think what's confusing this is there's $400 million worth of parks already here, and that 60 acres won't be added to the 400 million that you've already got. That's how you get credit for
But
that.
the 400 million, you are using it to come up with how much does it cost per person.
Right.
I'm saying someone gave you the land for the parks that you need for the additional 5,000 people who will move in. Why are you still collecting money for the additional 5,000 people who will move in? Remember, what's my North Star? My North Star is affordable housing. If I can eliminate this, I will make housing more affordable.
So I think the objective of this approach, which might not be consistent with your North Star, is that the next new customer, new development, is on par with the folks who already live, with the investment that the folks who already live here have made in parks. So that's what that's what the method is trying to achieve. If we're showing that right now, people who live in Sammamish have effectively invested $6,734 per dwelling unit in the park system that's here, that's what the next person should pay when they become a new resident to Sammamish. And the scaling is where we try to achieve we try to eliminate the disincentives to build affordable housing.
And this answers my question. So if someone gives you today 100 acres, it doesn't help you. It doesn't help the public. It won't reduce the cost of housing.
Not in the way the current valuation is set up, it seems.
Yeah.
Yep.
That answers my question, which I disagree with.
Let me ask you the question differently. What is the difference between valuation process and appraisal process?
And
When you appraise the property, and is there any difference between, of course, maybe in the case of parks it's different. What is the difference between valuation process and appraisal process? When you want to go and appraise a property, you look at the value of the land, value of the structure. And valuation, I'm assuming, do the same thing with the
Yes.
park.
Probably not at the same level of detail.
And the value of the structure. In this case, the structure is park. So I understand where it's coming from. So if you assume the same process applies to the valuation, is the same as applies to the appraisal process, and looking at the land and the structure, Hisham has a good point, and he says, wait a minute, where's the land? The land is zero. As the appraised value of the land is zero because it was donated. So all you have to do is to evaluate the structure and charge according to the value of the structure and delete the reference and the calculation related to the price of the land that was actually donated, but the city did not pay for it.
And I think that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
You look at only at a structure, you didn't look at the land value?
But some of them were purchased by the city, so you have to value the land if they were purchased by the city.
Those I understand. I'm kind of following up with Hisham's comment.
Yeah, anything that was donated is not being counted as that value. But if something was donated and then you built on it and you improved it, those improvements would count.
And that is specific reference to that Big Rock Park. Did you check it and this was the case for that particular site?
Yeah. So we were given a value of improvements on the site and what the city actually paid to improve that site.
So the land was not included.
So in that case, that land value was zero. Using his calculation, the cost of the land and the cost of the structure. The cost of the land in this case would have been zero. The cost of the structure would be, let's just say 10 million, would be 10 million.
Yeah, I don't have the number broken out.
No, that's fine.
But
just
that is
for
how
the
we would
measure
look
of
at it,
this
yes.
thing. And if he did not donate, from taking Commissioner Hisham's example of taking the donation as such, if he had not donated it, but he had sold it to the city, and that sale was like some $15 million, that'll be 15 plus 10, that's 25. That's what made the calculation that you brought up to.
Yeah, then
instead of the 10.
that 25 million in this scenario would be added to that, would be included in that 400 million.
Got it. Okay.
So I missed the nuance of your question. It's different from an appraisal process in that we are taking into account in the valuation where the money came from, basically how the city acquired the property, and it's not included if it was donated.
Thank you for clarification.
So this is more of a curiosity thing than anything. How does that work with parks that are predate the city, for example? There's parks that were obviously here before the city incorporated. And then what if the city bought the property for the park in 2005, and obviously the value of that land is much higher now? Do you use the 2005 number, or do you use some escalated number? In the end, I guess
Escalated.
it probably doesn't matter, but I'm just curious if this keeps up with reality or not.
Escalated to the current day. All the values that were acquired, that are includable, are brought up to today's dollars.
So I want to throw a nuance in here since I'm an old parks guy. A donation of large parcel to the city is a great thing, but it might not meet the community's needs for, say, neighborhood park or a ball field, because there's restrictions on how you can use that land. So it's a real balancing act. And you didn't present a CIP list of parks projects, but it's the same sort of concept on the transportation side. Is parks is looking at globally what the city needs based on the parks plan. And so a donation may or may not totally fit in that plan or meet all of those needs, hence the need for impact fees to make sure the entire community is served, as well as the new residents.
And you can build out the improvements needed on that park. And unfortunately, impact fees can't help you maintain a park that's been given, donated.
By that definition, doesn't it make it difficult for us to nail down this number? It feels like we are trying to nail Jello to the wall, because I keep understanding what we are saying, and then I keep going back to failing on understanding this thing. If Hisham had that 10 acres of land, if he had 10 acres of land, I want to be his best friend, first of all, but let's say he has 10 acres of land that he's donated. Yeah, exactly. If he has that 10 acres of land, and that's, to Commissioner John's question, something that cannot be used for parks. It comes right in the way that we have a plan for a transit center or something like that, and it's going to be used. And there is an impact fees for it, and there is a valuation for it. And we decide that, and tomorrow with the 2,100 people coming in, usage changes over time. And as that usage changes over time, wouldn't that also change this kind of metric? I somehow feel that there is a tension in the numbers, that we are using an empirical formula to do a very subjective analysis. Or am I wrong in that assumption to say that we're doing that? Well, that's my core problem in this thing. I mean, using a good empirical formula on a good subjective test case, but they are not the same. They cannot be both the numerator and denominator, and so on and so forth.
I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but in what we're trying to do is make take a defensible approach, consistent approach, and it's based on a snapshot of the information that we have at this time. And that's all we can really do. We're trying to match the growth forecast with the projects that will serve that growth. That's very important that there's consistency there. The parks calculation's a little bit differently. It's different with that cash investment approach, but we're linking it to the project list. It's all about consistency between the numerator and the denominator, and using the information we have now in the best way we can. But, in some ways, the one thing we do know is that we're going to be wrong, because these, growth is going to be different than we're forecasting. Project costs are going to go up at different rates of inflation than we're forecasting. And all you can do is, when you next look at this, 3 years from now or 5 years from now, that you take a snapshot and update all those numbers and recalculate it. It's just sort of, in a perfect world, these would be dynamic and they would change from day to day as conditions change from day to day. But all we can do is update them with new information.
And that's normal. Like we can come 5 years down the line and say, oh, we thought it was going to be this, and so we charged $2,477 per person in this whole thing. We find out now that it's only $1,700. So we've done more, or that it's $3,100 and we've charged way less and we need to improve on this thing. And that's a normal thing. You've seen this happen across the board.
Oh, yeah, it happens rents, connection charges, impact fees. Yeah, it's an accepted, it's just a
margin of error
condition. And we try to mitigate it as much as we can by forecasting growth and building in cost escalation and bringing costs up to current dollars. But it's imperfect, but we do the best we can.
Got it.
There's actually some slides on this later about talking about the future and about how we want to, as a city, plan to update these. There's some options for you. We as staff think we should be updating these fairly frequently. I think the last time we did it was 8 years ago. Yeah, so we can do better than that. And we think that in response to what you're saying, in response to what I'm hearing here, that, there are a whole host of variables that we really can't predict, and we're trying our best to predict what might happen. However, if that doesn't play out, we do want to be able to come back in a fairly short order, whether it's a 2-year cycle or something, and make those updates so that the impact fee remains most closely accurate to what we know is happening and what we're forecasting.
Got it. Thank you.
Just one last question. So if I look at the overall area of parks that we have in Sammamish compared to the population, and I compare it to neighboring cities, Bellevue, Redmond, Mercer Island, whatever, do we have more per person, less per person? Are we average per person?
So we'll show you some comparable charges in the region in a few slides here that will give you a sense of that. I think for parks, you're right in the zone of other communities in the region here, and some are actually quite a bit more.
Hey, Sham, are you asking about acreage or value?
Well, I'm equating them because
I'm talking about acreage.
A measure of parks per person. It's just expressed in dollars. But
No, I'm talking about land. And let me tell you where I'm heading with this, so you know what's in my mind. My mind, I want this number to go to 0, to make housing more affordable. Any tax I can remove, I want to remove it to make housing more affordable. If we have enough parks, if we have, let's say, twice as much as the normal size of parks that cities have, you can tell me no, I don't. But I'm saying, do we need to continue growing parks? We have to let go something in order to make housing available. If we continue doing what we do, we will never make housing affordable. We have to do something different.
So we can come back with that information from our Parks Department. I don't have that. I'm sure that our Parks staff would know that pretty readily, as many of them have worked for other cities and probably have information on that. So definitely we'll flag that one to bring back to you. It's a good question. I'm actually really curious to see what the outcome on that is too.
And just as a reminder, in case not everyone's aware of this, impact fees are optional in the sense that you are not required to charge them. And furthermore, if you want to charge them, you don't have to charge them at the level that we calculate. The level that we calculate should be viewed as a ceiling. And if you go over that ceiling, we're suggesting that you face some legal risk. But you can go from a legal perspective, you can go as far under that calculation as you want to. That's not a legal problem, it's a financial problem, where are you going to get the money from? But impact fees are optional, just to be clear.
And just to add as well, we do hear regularly as part of public comment on development permit proposals that the development will impact the city's parks. And there are many people in the community who do provide that feedback to us, that they want to make sure that new development that does come online in the city is providing for additional park resources So I hear what you're saying, but it's the same thing about transportation. So on the flip side, are you saying that we should lower the fee, transportation impact fee? It depends on really the impact and what our plan is to build out our infrastructure. So
I did not say that about transportation. That's why I stayed quiet. But I can say it about parks. Because I started by asking, do we have more than the average park size? Because if we do, then I will ask for it strongly, that we don't need more parks. But I do not know if we have enough parks, or maybe we don't have enough.
Right. Yeah, good question.
Suda, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So this is a guideline, you're providing it to the city, saying that, hey, these are the maximum levels you can have the impact fees. I like the methodology, it's very confusing, but I do understand the, madness behind the magic, right? So how about other cities? Are they going through the same kind of methodology and then coming with whatever number that is? I just want to hear that. So,
Yes, and we'll show you some of those in a couple of slides if that works.
okay, perfect. And going back to Commissioner Elkabad's point on parks, especially, if we can make that like zero, if it's useful for affordability, that would be great. But I don't know if any other cities have anything much less on these impact fees from parks, or are we like in the middle? Do we know?
We'll show you that with the comparables.
Okay, thank you.
I was surprised that you made a comment that traffic impact fees are not required under the Gross Management Act.
That's right.
I was under the impression that's mandated. I didn't know that.
So we
Wow.
corrected that. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's right. Take over.
Okay, implementation considerations, and this will start with scaling. So taking where we left off, and I'll focus on the parks column here, but the approach we're taking is the same for both. So you recognize the $6,733 and 73 cents, that's 67.34 from the previous slide. That third line down, blended impact fee per DU. So that is the park impact fee for a dwelling unit, period, whether it's multifamily or single family. We know that for the city of Sammamish, the average number of occupants per dwelling unit, again, blind to the type of dwelling unit, is 2.75 occupants. And the square footage of an average dwelling unit for both multifamily, single family, so that's a blended average, 2,153 square feet. Those metrics allow us to calculate both an impact fee per occupant, which you see there, $2,448 and 63 cents, and an impact fee per square foot of $3.13 per square foot. Why are those numbers important? That impact fee per occupant is going to create the floor for us because we know there aren't dwelling units built for less than one person. So a dwelling unit built for one person is equal to that impact fee per occupant, $2,448. I'm building to the scaling methodology. If that's our floor, then we can charge an impact fee of $3.13 per square foot for development that comes in, and it will create a sliding scale. So smaller dwelling units over that smallest impact fee size of 783 square feet, which is the dwelling unit size equivalent to one occupant. Anybody over that size of 783 feet, though, they would pay the $3.13 per square foot up to a maximum fee. So you see maximum proportionate impact fee size, 2,653. This is where that square footage is where data from the region shows that the correlation between the number of occupants and the size of a dwelling unit levels off. So that's the effective ceiling to the scaled impact fee, and the maximum fee then for dwelling units of that size or larger would pay $8,299.10. So you've got a floor and a ceiling and a scaled impact fee in between, applied as an impact fee per square foot. Same methodology for transportation. We're taking the single-family dwelling unit charge and the multifamily dwelling unit charge and looking at your current housing stock to derive a blended impact fee per dwelling unit of $16,018.92. Same approach used as for parks to calculate an impact fee per occupant per square foot, and then a minimum of $5,825.06 and a maximum of almost $20,000 for a new dwelling unit larger than 2,653 square feet. So that's what scaling does. And at the lower end, smaller end, you can see the fees are, pretty reasonable. They're a lot lower than your existing impact fees, and they go up to a lot higher, but they plateau above that 2,653 square feet. There are other ways to approach scaling. You could create tiers so that for in 500-foot increments you get different fees instead of doing a per square foot. We've heard from a number of clients now that they would rather just have, when someone comes in, give you the square footage, calculate the charge, and if someone comes in a year later to do a 200-foot deck or bathroom improvement, then many cities they'll just pick a number, and if the addition is smaller than that, they wouldn't charge for a change like that. So I mean that's something that could be handled by policy. But that's the scaling approach that we've used. Yeah.
John, can I ask? When I've looked at this in the past, the obvious question in my mind was the maximum, because most every house that's built in Sammamish now is 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. Maybe I'm exaggerating slightly, but not that much. And so it feels like if everybody's building McMansion, shouldn't the traffic impact fee be able to go up from there? Now, tell me if this is the right explanation for that. What you said was there's data that suggests that at a certain point it's, and I don't know what the number is, 4 people, and there's really never more than 4 people. You can build a 9,000 square foot house, but typically it's still 4 people. So you can't, so in order for it to be defensible, and maybe the number is 3.5, I don't know, but in order for it to be defensible, you cannot just slide that upper number up as high as you want, because you can't defend against the fact that it still comes back to the people. And if the maximum is on average typical 4, that's all you get, no matter how big the house gets.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So, and the data is really interesting, and it's really consistent all across the region. We've got data like that from the Portland metro area. We've got it from Puget Sound, and it's amazing. I mean, occupancy climbs pretty linear with the size of the dwelling unit, and then it just flattens out. And you think about it anecdotally, it makes some sense. Some of these larger homes might just have 2 people in them, and and you might find families of 8 in a 1,500 square foot 4-bedroom home, but on average, that correlation is pretty strong and supportable, and that's why we think the ceiling approach is the correct fit.
Thank you.
When we do the fee in lieu, does this impact fee get calculated as part of the overall cost, or is it below the line?
you're referring to the fee in lieu for our inclusionary affordable housing program. It is in addition to, so it's a separate fee. The fee in lieu is related to the inclusionary affordable housing requirement, and it's fractional units, and it's a separate program that would be payable at the point of building permit issuance or payable at the point of occupancy or the first sale of the home.
So let me be more direct. Is there a 10% on top of this for the fee in lieu, or is this it?
I guess I still don't understand the question.
The house cost, construction cost is $1,000. I'm not providing any affordable units, so I'm paying a fee in lieu of $100. But I'm also paying an impact fee of $10. Does the overall cost that you calculate the impact fee on is my 1,000 construction plus the 10 for the impact fee, and then on top of that you take your 10, or?
It's in addition to. That's the question. It's impact fees are collected separately from the inclusionary affordable housing fee.
I'm building my own house, and I'm not providing the affordable housing. Again, $1,000, I'm paying it to the contractor, designer, etc. I'm paying the city the impact fee of $100. My total cost to me is now $1,100. The 10%, is it calculated out of the 1,100, or is it calculated out of the 1,000 only?
What is the 10% that you're referring to?
The impact fee.
The
in lieu
fee. The in lieu fee is calculated on a per square foot amount of $34.45 per square foot. So it's not a percentage. It's at that point when someone is choosing to or eligible to take the alternative fee in lieu for the inclusionary affordable housing program, the fee is assessed at a per square foot, does not include garages, non-finished space, but it is a per square foot valuation that then is multiplied out for the finished space.
Okay.
Sorry, I think that's where I was disconnected on that. I was trying to understand what the 10% was.
I thought the last time we left it was a percentage of the overall, not a fee per square foot, and maybe I forgot.
It's a 10% of all the units built for a development, but if a unit results in a fractional
Talking about
unit,
a single family house.
then it's a $34.45 per square foot.
So how do these compare in the region? And it's pretty. So what we're using as the basis of our comparison is the average home size. So we couldn't do this for a number of different home sizes and apply the scaling, but under the approach, the transportation impact fee, which is currently high in the region, would remain high, but not a substantial increase from the current fee for the city. And you see there what the transportation impact fees are for a number of neighboring comparable cities. Not comparable, but neighboring anyway. And same thing for parks.
Can you go back to
Sure.
the previous one? Your number is shown in here, 16,000 calculated, but in the previous slides, you're showing 17,000. Why there is a discrepancy?
Because this is under the specific assumption of a square footage. The previous one you saw that was a little over
This is-
17,000.
Hey, Doug, can you turn your mic on and lean forward so this gets on the
I can
recording?
answer it. Yeah, this is the blended impact fee
I
from
see.
from the scaling. So, and the 17,000 is specifically for a single family
For single family.
residence. Yeah. So if the 14,204 is for a single family residence, we should have the 17 up there.
Is the blending the reason why, let's just take Redmond, for example, is about $6,000 less than what Sammamish is projected
Those
to be?
charges are, it's really hard to say why they're different. All the systems are different, the needs are different, the plans are different. All the other fees up there are specifically for a single family residence. Sammamish's calculated fee there is that blended is the blended 60.
So it is just
Can we have?
coincidence-
Go ahead.
Sorry, it's just coincidental then that Sammamish and North Bend, which is extremely residential, farms at the bottom of the list, versus something like Redmond and Bellevue, which has a blending, is much cheaper than what it is.
So there may be something to that, but there may be lots of other factors contributing as well.
Then it has to do with the extension of their infrastructure and the condition
Exactly.
of infrastructure.
Exactly.
I like to think of it as a factor of they are the recipients of major regional transportation investments. And consequently,
State highways going through
light
the cities.
rail,
Light rail.
transit lines, and other investments, right? And consequently, their overall burden goes down in order to provide that service.
But Dave, can we be 4 times as expensive as Mercer Island? What are they doing
We have
better than
no
us?
idea what
How can we be as smart as they are so the impact fee on our development is that low? It's 4 times. I'm not talking about just 1.5.
So Mercer Island is, number one, Mercer Island is largely built out. Number two, their growth is factored into centers. That's really where their growth is planned to occur. Number three, their centers are immediately adjacent to or within proximity to significant regional transportation investments. So consequently, when new units are being built in centers that are next to regional transportation investments that they don't have to pay for, or that they pay a small share of in some cases, there is very little investment needed in order to provide transportation services to those new units being built. It is really part of our growth strategy as a city is trying to focus our growth into centers along areas where we can make one-time investments in building out our transportation infrastructure, trying to make sure it's maintained and improved over time. But that is one way that we can, according to what your quest is, reduce the costs. If we continue to grow out as a city through infill, then it continues to result in a much higher cost of service because we now have to make system-wide improvements in order to account for that additional growth happening. That is one of the premises behind updating the town center plan, is trying to really start to learn how we can better grow in centers. We do, as part of our comprehensive plan, also have other centers identified as future potential sub-areas that would require a lot of planning and investment. It's no secret. But I do want to say that is, in order to become more comparable to cities like Mercer Island, we would need to focus our growth in centers.
The only thing I'll add to that is we don't know when Mercer Island last looked at their transportation impact fees. Those could be 20 years old. We don't know. We really don't, but these are
I don't
apples
need
and
you to
oranges.
answer me here.
Yeah.
All what I can ask for, can we compare what they are using to calculate versus what we are using to calculate and see if there is a way we can reduce ours so we can make housing more affordable?
It's also a factor that we can choose to lower the fee. So as a city, we can choose to lower the fee. It is a tool that is used by many cities in order to send a message to developers about the type of development that they want. It is a way for us to leverage resources that we have to get the right type of development that we are looking for as a city.
But Dave, you and I, we know very well, not a dime out of this will hurt the developer. It will hurt the end user, the person who is looking to go and buy or rent. And that's why I need to figure out a way to reduce it, or I want a way to figure out a way to reduce it. I care less about the developer. You know this very well. They will pass it to the end user.
But I guess what I'm saying is you can choose to reduce it.
But if it's money that someone needs to spend, someone is going to pay for it. It's either the city or either the end user. I'm saying maybe we are wrong in the way we are coming up with this math. If Mercer Island is 25% of ours, maybe we are wrong. Can we take another look?
And maybe Mercer Island is choosing to reduce it to attract development of a certain type in a certain area.
How are they making up for that difference?
By their tax base.
So if we so choose, just to follow up on his point, if we so choose that, okay, there's going to be Sound Transit that's going to have trains running all the way to Bellevue and to Redmond, so we will have a lot more bus service that's coming into Sammamish and going. Would we be just as attractive as Mercer Island is, to your metric, to the transit, and so that reduces the cost? Or is this number, what I'm trying to get at is that, is there no way out of this number? I don't understand how the 16,000 cannot be impacted with the existing constraints. Whatever the decision that Mercer Island is making to bring it to 4,300, and we have it at 16,000, to say that that $12,000 gap would not change unless we do something drastic sounds a little off base for me.
We have operated as a city historically under the motto of development pays for development. That plays out in our permit fee structure, that plays out and has played out in our impact fee structure. And the city has been able to collect a fairly large sum of impact fee dollars, and those dollars have gone towards construction of needed infrastructure. Now, I think one of the questions that I'm hearing is there another way to calculate it? Are we sure that this is the right way to calculate it? Is Mercer Island using a different formula than we're using? And we'll look into that. I'm also curious about why it's so much lower. I have assumptions behind that, which I explained, but maybe there's other reasons. So we'll happily look into that. I think if you look at other cities like North Bend and Bothell, they're also at different phases of their build out as cities. Mercer Island, established much longer ago. It really does not require new roads to be built for a majority of the island, and it is an island. There are not people connecting through. However, you could argue that Sammamish is sort of like Mercer Island in that way because we're on the plateau and people aren't connecting through but for the parkway. So it's an interesting one. And at the end of the day, I mean, we're in a position where we are continuing on with the prior motto of development pays for development. And we are calculating out an impact fee that is based on our assumptions that we understand to be the costs of providing service to new residents in the city. And that is what the fee ultimately ends up being. If there is a different approach where we want to be more efficient in the level of service of what development pays for, maybe that's a factor. There are multiple variables that go into this. It depends on where you set the dial, how you move the lever, and what you get. So these are good questions, and this is why we have had multiple meetings on this topic, starting from the real high level, getting down to this point, and this is why we wanted to bring this to you, and then we will have a public hearing at a later date on it because we want to get through these questions and make sure you have a chance to feel comfortable with the fee and understand it. Maybe you don't agree with it, but our goal tonight is, do you understand more or less how we got to the fee?
Couple of comments. Number one is that when you look at the total impact fee amount that city has collected, I believe, I looked at it the last 10 years, 93% of that coming from residential development.
Right.
And you compare with the other cities, that rate is about 30 to 35, I believe. Redmond was 35%. So we are so far behind the other jurisdiction as far as the impact fee that we're collecting because we don't have that much of a commercial development.
For any comparison, do not compare Sammamish to Redmond or Bellevue. They have Microsoft.
No.
Microsoft put in 100 acres
but
of
we
new
have to keep in mind and I totally agree with David, we have to be creative and look at the ways that we can incentivize in a way that we bring more tax dollars to the city and reduce the reliance on the impact fee collected from developers that they build houses. For instance, something that would be worth looking into it, and I hope that you're going to be considering bring it to us for the discussion, is changing the zoning. Maybe changing the zoning in certain areas that the roadway system and the infrastructure in that area is better. Maybe the impact fee would be different.
One of the
so
things
we have to be creative.
Yeah, we have to be creative, but maybe it's for a different day. We need to sit and think about how can we make housing affordable. And I know I'm getting off point here. Unless we do something different, we're just going in a circle. We're not making housing affordable. Everything I hear, it's making housing more expensive. We have to figure out a different way than how we manage business to make housing affordable. How we do that, I have no clue.
But realistically, Isham, look at it this way, that the developers that building a single family unit that is going to be put in the market for $1.5 million, 16,000 versus 14,000 doesn't make that much of a difference to him. That would not be a thing that would turn him down and say, I'm going to take my project somewhere else.
So I'll take chair privilege and wrap this conversation up by saying a couple things. Nobody's selling one for 1.5. They're selling them for 2 and 2.5, by the way. But I think that it's important to recognize that while it may not be the overall solution, the idea of a sliding scale is intended to move on from a fixed number to try to make some of those types of housing more affordable. It doesn't do much to make a single-family home more affordable, but it is intended as a way to try to address making condos and apartments and multifamily more affordable. So in that case, it is a bit of good news and a step in the right direction. And the question becomes, how far do we want to go with that? And do we want to continue? Yeah. And how far do we want to go in the future with that? So I think, it does start to take a baby step in the right direction for affordability. And we just have to figure out what people really want to do, how far they want to go. So let's move on.
Yeah, so wanted to show you the parks comparison as well. The calculated park impact fee is actually a slight reduction from the current impact fee you see there for an average single-family dwelling, about a little more than $5 reduction.
John, can I say one thing about these charts? Yeah. I think it's important to really be clear what we're comparing. So, for ours, it's current and calculated, and that's great. What is everybody else's?
Yeah.
And I say that because I think some of these would be interesting to compare, after all these other cities go through and do the same thing we're doing. And, those numbers might look totally different a year from now.
Redmond's
so
doing
at the very
theirs right
least,
now.
the chart should have in red letters, every other city is historical in nature, or some words like that.
Yeah, that's a great point, because those are all their current fees, and some of them are undergoing reviews right now, and we know that those fees will likely go up.
We have a comparison, though, coming up.
And this combines the two. Is that what you're talking about?
No, further down, it shows there's cities with new one, the new fees from the cities further down in the deck.
Oh, okay. So this shows the two together and how those compare as a combination. See North Bend up there. And then just to give you an example of Kirkland's recently adopted scaling methodology applying to park and transportation. They scale by square footage, as we're suggesting here. $5.04 per square foot for parks compared to, I think it was $3.13 is the recommended fee or the proposed fee here. $4.39 per square foot for transportation, and that's $7.44 here in Sammamish, the calculated fee. So the max for a single-family residence for parks, almost $9,100 in Kirkland, and the maximum for transportation, $7,900 per dwelling unit. And then we've got North Bend as well. And these fees are very comparable. You saw it from the chart a couple slides back. $342 per square foot for parks compared to $313 as the calculated charge here. $783 per square foot for transportation compared to $744. And they don't, it doesn't appear, have a maximum fee in their schedule.
Does that mean it just keeps going up? So if you had a 5,000 square foot house, it would be multiplied out.
Yeah. Which
the defensibility of that is the question.
We have some issues with that. Okay, code updates.
So John, before you go on, I totally understand how difficult it is to do comps, but you didn't mention some of the other influences that might play into this, like local improvement districts,
Oh, yeah.
transportation improvement districts, which is fairly new. So each city is going to have its own very unique blend feeding into all of this. How much commercial they've got versus residential, infill versus raw land. So I just want to thank you for trying to do something that's really complicated.
Thank you for mentioning that. I should have set the stage a little better because, yeah, those are exactly the kinds of factors that differ for every one of those cities and play into higher and lower impact fees ultimately. But the mix of commercial and residential is really important because when you think about what the denominator is here in Sammamish, it's so residential, there's just not a lot of units to spread these costs around, where you look at some of these other cities that have significant commercial sectors, the denominator is just a lot bigger because there's so much more development, a lot of it being commercial, and the unit cost just goes down. So, yeah, that's an unfortunate fact of life for a largely residential community.
John, before going to the update, can you elaborate the difference between scalable impact and blended impact?
Yeah, so all the blended impact fee was, and that was for transportation, was we took the one fee for single family and the second fee for multifamily, which come right out of the ITE trip generation manual. And then we looked at the number of single family residences in Sammamish and the number of multifamily residences. And by multiplying that out, we were able to come up with a single fee per dwelling unit, regardless of whether it's a single family dwelling unit or a multifamily dwelling unit. That's the blended fee. So that's just converting those two.
Regardless of the square footage.
Regardless of the square footage, regardless of the type of dwelling unit, that's the blended impact fee for the average size dwelling unit in Sammamish.
And the scalable?
And then scalable, we took that fee and we turned it into a dollar amount per square foot so that a smaller dwelling unit with fewer square feet would pay a much lower impact fee, and a larger dwelling unit would pay a higher impact fee with more square footage.
And
that's the scaling.
And the staff report makes reference to the hybrid. What is the hybrid? I saw a reference to the hybrid. I think that you asked the Planning Commission to look at the hybrid. There was a word hybrid. I saw it somewhere. There's none.
I'm not sure about
I
that.
thought that. So the recommendation is between these two options, what are we looking at as far as the options? What kind of feedback you need? Kind of summarize the discussion. What kind of feedback you need as far as the methodology to calculate the impact fees?
Yeah, I think we've stopped short of recommending. We will ultimately as a result of these discussions, but that is the calculated fee is our proposed fees. The scaling is a legal requirement, and we think that's the best scaling approach, the method we've used. So we're looking for feedback, but the methodology is tried and true, and we're not doing anything radical here. So those are the maximum defensible impact fees that we would, write up in our report. The council's ultimately going to choose whether they're comfortable with the full cost recovery or something less than that.
I'm assuming with some feedback from the Planning Commission, right?
Yes, so getting into this, we actually don't adopt the fee by ordinance. It's adopted by resolution into the city's fee schedule. Instead, what is adopted is code changes that ultimately drive how the fee is calculated. So what the next step here will be is for us to bring back some code revisions to you in January. When we started, so FCS did a great job of providing code edits to us that respond to the scaling and reflect changes to state law and some of the requirements that we have to meet here. However, we started digging into the balance of the code, which is not their doing. That comes from King County from long ago, prior to the city's incorporation, that really hasn't been updated since then. It's been patched and modified to reflect some other things like deferral of impact fee payments. When we started looking at it, we realized that we really want to repeal 3 sections and replace it with 1 section to streamline it, make it more user-friendly. If you look at it, you'll see what I'm saying when you start to read through it. So we're going to be spending some time working on that and bring that back to you in January. Some of the questions that we'll get into here are really around how, when we're writing that code section, we direct our future selves to update this. So some of the things that we can include in the code are around, I want to say, refunds, credits, how the payments, when the payment is made, all these things that we're allowed, that are included in the state law, but that we're allowed to refine, to have local refinements to. The thing that is hard to include in the code is codified specific language about what is to be included in the CIP list, right? What is 100%, what is 30%, what is 18%? That is somewhat subjective. So there is limited discretion in the code language because we have to respond to what is directed by state law. But where the discretion exists is actually in the traffic engineer, public works realm, parks realm, about what is being included in the cost, if that makes sense. And that is part of that conversation that we had about how do we decide it was 100? How do we decide that it was this percent attributable to new development? So the code language that you're going to see is going to do our best job at trying to inform us about how this calculation will work in the future. We want to take what we learned from this effort and apply it to something that can then be repeatable going forward. So we don't have to have this same conversation, maybe some level of it, but not with this much intensity. And that everybody knows how it works going forward, what the inputs are, and ultimately that can then be something that we can just put on repeat every 2 years or whatever it is that we decide we want to do. So we look forward to that. So I guess this some other questions in the interim is, should we automatically update fees annually using a CPI or some other index to adjust them? Or should we focus on redoing them and fully recalculate them every 2 years or every 3 years? One option is to use a CPI every year, but recalculate them every, say, 4 or 5 years, or to use a CPI unless and then recalculate it, but only there was another one that I had. Sorry, it's been a long meeting, so.
David, can I interrupt you? Can someone move to extend this by 15
So
minutes?
moved.
Seconded.
Been moved and seconded to extend to 8:45. Let's try to get her done by that point. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you.
So seeking feedback on what the commission thinks about updating impact fees going forward. Do you have feedback?
John, let me ask a question. You're working with different jurisdictions. What's the average number? How frequent the other jurisdiction they update the impact fees? Is that every 5 years? What's your experience?
Every 5. There's really no standard, but every 5 years is probably a general. Yeah.
So it's a combination.
But they're inflating them in between using a cost index.
What you suggest makes sense, David. A combination of frequency as well as consumer price index of every other year, maybe.
There's an index that's probably more frequently used. The Engineering News Record publishes a construction cost index, and that's more frequently used for capital costs like this, and you open the door to that or other index, but that's more commonly used in the CPI. But.
And David, you said that's more difficult to manage?
No, not at all. We could write that into the code.
And by the way, Commissioner Bresco had sent some comments. I don't know if everybody saw them, but that was essentially what he suggested as well. And I think that's maybe where the word hybrid came from.
Yeah.
I have a question about the impact fee. Impact fees have a sunset clause, don't they? That if the city collects money and then they don't spend it on the project, can you elaborate on that? And
So a collected impact fee, the city has 10 years to spend it on a project. Or
I thought that was tied into the CIP time limit. If the CIP is 6 years, no?
Nope. No, they're completely, that's a common, I'd say misperception. The planning period can be anything, but impact fees in the door, you've got 10 years to spend them. Unspent impact fees, you can be required to pay them back if you're called on that. Now, I have not heard of a single instance where that has happened, and I know that the city does a really good job of tracking its impact fee balances, and it's first in, first out, so it would be a pretty unique circumstance where you've got impact fees that have been banked for 10 years and unspent.
I was with the city of Bothell. We had cases, we had to return
really?
money. Yes.
So a lot of that has to do with whether or not you have projects in your TCIP that are moving forward that you can spend those constrained funds on.
Yeah.
So if there are sometimes projects that are purely safety or ADA ramps, those kind of things, and you're not able to move other projects forward like Sahali, you can't spend it on it because it's not something that's attributable to new development. So we will switch gears here for a second. Let's see, we'll move past this one. We used this one already. So another thing that we talked about and previously in a past meeting was that the Planning Commission had recommended that we continue to allow for waivers for affordable housing or reductions to impact fees for affordable housing below 30% AMI. The concept, as I understood it, was that generally speaking, these projects are already supported by public funding, and there's already a public policy decision that's been made, so it would make sense to also allow them to proceed with some form of reduced or waived impact fee. So that is something we will be writing into code. We bring that back to you in a draft for you to review. Now, just to respond to some follow-up questions that we had received, appreciated receiving a few emails on this. There was a question about providing the proportion of collected impact fees to TIP expenses. We're working on this with finance and with our public works staff. What we're going to be doing is looking at a planning timeframe, so 6 years, for example, for a TCIP, and we will then look at the amount of impact fees collected for that timeframe of planned expenses, right? So if the TCIP says that the 6-year window of funded projects cost $20 million, I'm just making something up, how much in that 6-year window did we collect in terms of impact fees? Just to try and get an understanding of that. Now, we're not going to do 10 years because it's hard to predict out 10 years. We do have a 6-year funding or funded TCIP, so it is easy to compare to that. I think we did talk a little bit about where the square footage comes from as an estimate of occupancy, which is based on census data and occupancy ranges. So we did talk about that this evening. The scaling eliminates the prior categories that we had. So previously currently we do have in our code single family, multifamily, and townhome as categories. It depends on which impact fee you're talking about. Some of them, I can't remember which one only has single family and multifamily. Some of them have single family, multifamily, and townhome. There are different categories there. And what we're proposing is eliminating these in favor of square footage. So square footage becomes, I think the term someone used, is a proxy for the number of residents and people that are living in the units. We did talk about limitations on upward scaling. This needs to be defensible. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when we receive a lawsuit from master builders or someone along those lines, this group will be responsible for defending it. Planning commissioners will not be there in that court hearing. So we're working to make sure that when we do get in some form of a appeal or a lawsuit on this, if it did happen, not hoping that it won't, that it is defensible. And we do have a record that supports it. Impact fees generally serve as a one-time startup or connection fee. We did talk about that. It is not something that is a maintenance fee or an ongoing recurring fee. So it is just that one time when a new home is built and new trips are added or new people are using parks. That is what it's related to. Impact fees can only be attributed to eligible costs and project types, not maintenance. We did talk about that. Some great questions were asked about how we took the estimated cost for a project, identified what's attributable to new development. That was a great conversation. Really appreciated that. Impact fees are calibrated on city growth target of 2,100 units following the comprehensive plan and regional growth framework. There was a question about that, why we're using 2,100 units. That is because based on the Growth Management Act, based on PSRC's Vision 2050, based on King County countywide planning policies, that is the premise for growth under the regional growth framework. The next question was about use of service areas. We do not use service areas, and the fee is not broken out into service areas. The TCIP projects are prioritized by need. That was a question about how do we decide which project is funded and which is not funded, and which one moves forward and which one does not move forward. Public Works has a methodology to do that, and whereby they identify which projects are most needed and move forward. Tracking, reporting, and refund of transportation impact fee revenue is something that is addressed by state law. Currently, we do report out on the city's website revenue collected up through 2023, and I'll be looking into that and seeing if we can add 2024 there as well. I did note that 24 was missing. We haven't concluded 25 yet, so there's no need to report out on that yet. Scaling results in lower fee for smaller units, supporting development of smaller unit types. This was discussed in the agenda bill for the evening. This is consistent with the city's current approach to housing, where we are attempting to see smaller units built, which naturally results in more affordable units being built, more market affordable units being built because of the square footage of those units. So this in turn tries to drive developers to build smaller units, and it helps along with that. Scaling does not address actual occupancy. A large family building a small unit would pay less. That was a question, is can we charge people if they are living in a smaller unit for more people living in that unit? That's not how that works. It's a startup cost. It's a one-time cost, and we do not base it on the number of people that ultimately end up living there. Although I have some neighbors that have quite a few cars with this very small house, so I would say that, there are many people living in that house. Infrastructure supporting affordable units built with fee waivers would be funded across the larger tax base. So that question was, if we did waive the transportation impact fee, park impact fee for affordable housing, say 30% or below AMI, and there were trips being added to the system and impacts, and there were people showing up and using parks, how would the needed infrastructure improvements that go along with that project be funded? The answer is it is funded across the broader tax base, that the city is obligated to make up the difference for that when we are waiving or reducing those fees. Yep.
What does that mean?
What that means is that the need or the cost of that infrastructure, in a prior slide, we showed the breakdown of the cost attributable to new development. The cost that would be waived is then passed back up in that equation up higher. And
what I meant, what does it mean, the larger tax base? What is the larger tax base?
Property tax, the city's property tax base. And maybe I could say that differently, so that's a good question. I will change that in the future to be property tax base. General fund is another way to say it. The cost of supporting infrastructure is based on the costs presented in the city's CIPs. This was that question, and we did have a good conversation about it, about multimodal design, that if there is capacity improvement being made through multimodal design in addition to safety, that capacity improvement is something that is attributable to new development, that it could be charged back to impact fees. Mm-hmm. So I think we did have a good conversation about that. That's the end of the questions and answers.
I have a couple of questions. Question number one, I didn't see any reference to the ADUs.
We did talk about
So
that.
It was
ADUs,
not on a part of the list
Oh.
as far as the impact piece. Can you go back to that slide, David? You had a slide which showing different kind of residential use.
So the ADUs would be scaled using the scaling.
Yes.
So long as it's not more than 50, more than 50%.
that's right. They cannot exceed 50% of the impact fee that would be charged to the primary dwelling unit on the site. So they're limited as high as they can go. Other than that, you would look at the square footage and you would charge them based on the square footage using the scaling.
So the ratio, as far as this ratio based on the square footage of the ADU would be the same as a primary structure or primary unit
Per square foot fee.
per square footage?
Yes, yes, but it cannot exceed half of what would have been charged to the single-family
Okay,
residence.
second question, David, I brought it up a number of times. We're focusing on residential impact fee as far as traffic. How about the non-residential? Are you updating? Is your consultant, they're going to be looking at that, updating that? The non-residential, commercial use?
Yes, they are.
How
so
come we don't discuss this as
so
a
there-
part of this?
Doug showed a slide that had all the transportation impact fees for every land use resulting right there.
Are they going to change from the existing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so they will go up exactly proportional to the existing fees. The fee per peak hour person trip end is going up slightly, and all these will go up to reflect that increase.
But methodology as far as the calculation wouldn't change.
That's
The
right.
same methodology, but the
That's
cost increase basically would dictate the new numbers.
Yes, and Parks doesn't have a commercial impact fee. That one's only residential.
So the impact fee that the people that they see is not only residential impact fee. I think that we have to show this is a residential, this is non-residential. The total impact fee is so much. I don't see those numbers. I
Well-
see all residential numbers.
It's very, we're happy to do that. We do that sometimes with sample bills but it's very, there aren't naturally comparable commercial customers, right? You have to pick, okay, this is a retail store of X square feet, and then what is that charge in Sammamish? What would it be in North Bend? What would it becomes very challenging to make those comparables among commercial properties when the impacts are basically the same proportionally as the impacts you see for single-family
So for
residential.
non-residential use, which is something that is really important for us to keep in mind, particularly commercial, based on your experience and your numbers from the other jurisdiction compared to in here, are our rate for non-residential use in the Sammamish are higher than the other jurisdictions? Non-residential impact fees, traffic impact fees.
They are about, if so, you recall the transportation comparables for single-family residences. Sammamish was.
Residential, I'm talking about
I'm getting there. Sammamish was near the top of the list. They would be near the top of the list. The city would be near the top of the list for non-residential as well, because the fee, it's all based on the impact fee per trip or per peak hour person trip, and that has a proportional effect on residential and non-residential. So did that?
Yeah, the reason is that we're hearing from the public that the reason that we don't see that much commercial because a lot of people that they want to invest in a non-commercial, non-residential uses, they realize it's so expensive to make the investment in here, they go somewhere else.
So my suggestion here would be not that you need to do the comparison, you just need to note more
That note, yeah.
that
Okay.
commercial is also paying impact fees
Yeah.
for transportation.
And this will also be part of the code update because the timing about when commercial impact fees are paid as they relate to build out of new space. So if you have a new space that you're building, say you're building a mixed use development and you're including in that a commercial space, there is the timing about what fee you have to pay for that initial space. And then there is the build out of that space. And it's not always the same uses that the developer who built that will get, right? And there'll be a change of use over time. So trying to understand in your code how you relate these fees to new space, to first build out, and then to change of use is going to be something that's important. It's not abundantly clear in our code right now, and that's something we would like to improve so that over time we know when we get a TI, as you know, what is the impact fee?
Yeah.
I wanted to check with Suda to see, Suda, if you had any final thoughts or comments.
Is John?
I don't see Sudha. I'm on the panelists anymore.
Okay. We lost her. So my two final comments. One, if you're interested in the park per acres per resident in the 2024 Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan, there's a pretty good starting point with some description and a chart. It's not perfect. Page 56, go take a look at that as a starting point. Doesn't tell you other cities, but it does kind of give you the averages across cities of our size. There's a good starting point. The one thing that I would be interested in our next potentially final discussion about this is I'd like to think about and talk about a little bit of what the impact on the city would be where you have that graph, that curve that shows the fees going up to a maximum and flattening out, steepening that curve to try to create less burden on smaller sizes. Not necessarily, I understand we're at the minimum, it's 783, I think it was, but that's pretty small. And I think we should still consider whether there's a potential to continue to try to elicit a little bit more affordability in smaller, 783 is not very big. I mean, that, I think to me, an affordable unit that's 1,200 square feet still is, fairly small for a couple coming out of college or a couple that wants to retire or whatever. I'd like to at least try to think about if we chose to slide that over a little bit further, what would the real dollar impact be to the city, the taxpayers have to pay to make up some of that. I'd like to consider that because I do think that addresses some of further
recording in progress.
Further efforts to create affordability.
Okay.
And I think when it goes, it'd be good to talk through that because I suspect that with the council, you may have that conversation anyway. So it'd be good for us to touch on it a little bit first.
Okay. Thank you.
By the way, that graphic doesn't have the legend. You may want to put the legend. It doesn't say the square footage down the bottom. It doesn't say that.
Oh. We'll have that. Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
We did momentarily lose the Zoom meeting, so it's been restored. So
Just in time.
Yeah.
John, Doug, Luke, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate you
Thank you.
Great discussion.
surviving
Thank
through
you,
us.
guys.
That was a great discussion. Thanks a lot.
David, anything further?
No, except that the next meeting, the November 20th meeting, will include a presentation from the city's transportation engineering team, transportation planning team, related to how future forecast modeling works, how development permitting and concurrency works. There's quite a bit of information they've been working on in response to questions that they have collected from previous meetings. Additionally, following that, we're going to have a bit of an adjustment to our conversation as we're going to be probably pausing some work on the town center plan until the new council is in place. So we'll be talking about some of the core things that are actually needed to do in order for the town center plan to be brought into compliance with HB 1110 and HB 1220. An example of that is that the city is required to accommodate middle housing in all districts, all zones across the city. And we did so except for the town center. The only area, there are two districts or zones in the town center that don't allow middle housing, which are the TCC and the TCE. At density, in the TCC, it's densities that are comparable to R4, R6. It's lower currently than that. And the TCE is allowed at R1. It only allows single-family homes. So we do need to, at a minimum with the town center plan, and you'll hear more about this, make some changes because we have to allow that under those regulations. There are some other enhancements that could be made as well. So really now we're going to be looking at retooling and the scope of that. And depending on what the new council wants to do, we will proceed accordingly. But we do still think that there is a lot of value in discussing how the city's future forecast modeling works, transportation concurrency model works, how permitting works, how all these things fit together, because there I think is a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding about that out in the community. So we're wanting to help provide additional information as an educational opportunity so that regardless how the town center project moves forward, we at least have established that foundation. The second meeting, the next meeting in December is then a different topic. It's a code amendments that we're going to bring back for public hearing. You heard about that from Avril a couple of meetings ago. Then finally, that second meeting in December, I believe, will be canceled because that was previously when we had a town center discussion. But in light of pausing the town center discussion, we think it's best just to cancel the meeting and wait till the new year to continue that work.
All right. I think that's it. Could someone move to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded. We adjourn the meeting for this evening. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.